World War I, a conflict that scarred the 20th century like no other, was a maelstrom of political tensions, technological advancements, and human suffering. From the spark that ignited the flames in 1914 to the ashes of a reshaped world in 1918, its story is one of both grand strategy and individual sacrifice, of heroism and unimaginable horror. To truly understand this war is to delve into the intricate web of causes, the brutal realities of the battlefield, and the lasting consequences that echo even today. A tangled web of causes, the roots of World War I lay not in a single event, but in a complex interplay of factors that had been festering for decades. A web of alliances, known as the Triple Entente and the Triple Alliance, entangled European powers in a delicate balance. Nationalism, particularly in the newly unified Germany, stoked feelings of competition and rivalry. Imperial ambitions clashed in Africa and the Middle East, while arms races fueled an atmosphere of paranoia and mistrust. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria in June 1914 served as the catalyst, but it was merely the spark that ignited the tinderbox. Austria-Hungary, blaming Serbia for the act, issued an ultimatum with harsh demands. When Serbia refused to comply fully, Austria-Hungary declared war. A domino effect ensued, with alliances pulling nations into the conflict like ships dragged into a maelstrom. Within weeks, Europe was engulfed in flames. The crucible of conflict, the war that began with such swift escalation, soon settled into a bloody stalemate. The Western Front, stretching from the French coast to the Swiss border, became a grim tableau of trench warfare. Soldiers huddled in muddy ditches, facing machine gun fire, artillery barrages, and poison gas. Life in the trenches was a constant struggle against disease, vermin, and the crushing weight of fear and despair. Meanwhile, the Eastern Front saw even more devastating losses, with millions of Russian soldiers perishing in brutal offensives and counteroffensives. Beyond Europe, the war unfolded in colonial battlefields from Africa to Asia, with devastating consequences for local populations. New technologies, like tanks, airplanes, and submarines, brought a grim modernity to the battlefield, but they failed to break the deadlock. Beyond the trenches, while the war raged on the battlefields, its impact was felt far beyond. Women entered the workforce in unprecedented numbers, taking on vital roles in factories, farms, and hospitals. Propaganda machines churned out narratives of heroism and demonized the enemy, shaping public opinion and fueling the war effort. Societies were mobilized under the banner of total war, with every resource and individual directed towards the front lines. The war also unleashed a wave of nationalism and ethnic tensions, particularly in the multi-ethnic empires of Austria-Hungary and the Ottoman Empire. Minority groups, often caught between warring powers, faced persecution and displacement, foreshadowing the darker conflicts that would erupt in the following decades. Turning tides and a shattered world, the tide of the war began to shift in 1917. The entry of the United States with its vast industrial and manpower resources bolstered the Allied powers. Meanwhile, internal dissent and economic hardship weakened the Central Powers. A series of offensives on all fronts in 1918 finally led to the collapse of Austria-Hungary, Bulgaria, and the Ottoman Empire. Germany, facing imminent defeat, sued for peace in November 1918. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, aimed to bring closure to the war and reshape the world order. Germany was saddled with crippling reparations, territorial losses, and military restrictions. New nations emerged from the ashes of empires, redrawing the map of Europe. However, the seeds of future conflict were sown in the treaty's punitive measures and unresolved ethnic tensions. Enduring legacies, World War I left an indelible mark on the 20th century. It reshaped the political landscape, with the decline of European empires and the rise of the United States as a global power. It ushered in an era of disillusionment and cynicism, shattering the pre-war optimism and faith in progress. The horrors of the battlefield scarred a generation, giving rise to new artistic movements and literary expressions that grappled with the trauma of war. Perhaps the most lasting legacy of World War I is its role in paving the way for the even greater cataclysm of World War II. The unresolved grievances, the rise of extremist ideologies, and the arms race that followed the First War all contributed to the outbreak of World War II. The unresolved grievances, the rise of extremist ideologies, and the arms race that followed the First War all contributed to the outbreak of the next global conflict just 2 decades later. Unhealed wounds, the Treaty of Versailles, meant to secure peace, instead planted the seeds of future discontent. Germany, burdened by crippling reparations and stripped of its military prowess, festered with resentment. Nationalist and revanchist movements thrived, finding fertile ground in the economic hardship and humiliation inflicted by the treaty. Extremist ideologies. Amidst the social and economic upheaval, extremist ideologies like fascism and communism rose to prominence. In a world disillusioned by war and struggling to find a new order, these ideologies offered simple solutions and scapegoats for the complex problems at hand. Adolf Hitler, exploiting national sentiment and promising the restoration of German greatness, capitalized on this climate of anger and instability. An endless race, the fear of another war fueled an arms race of unprecedented scale. Nations, determined not to be caught unprepared, poured resources into developing new and ever more lethal weapons. This spiraling arms race further heightened tensions and suspicion, creating a volatile atmosphere ripe for conflict. The unfinished symphony. By the late 1930s, the conditions for another global war were in place. The unresolved grievances of World War I, the rise of extremist ideologies, and the unchecked arms race all converged to create the perfect storm. In 1939, with the German invasion of Poland, the world plunged headlong into World War II, a conflict that would claim even more lives and wreak even greater devastation than its predecessor. Beyond the battlefields, the legacy of World War I extends far beyond the bloodshed and destruction of the battlefields. It serves as a stark reminder of the catastrophic consequences of unchecked nationalism, unaddressed grievances, and the failure of diplomacy. It compels us to remain vigilant against the rise of extremism and to strive for peaceful solutions to international conflicts. Today, as we grapple with new challenges and emerging threats, the lessons of World War I remain as relevant as ever. The scars of that conflict may have faded, but its echoes continue to shape our world. By understanding its causes, its consequences, and its enduring legacy, we can hope to prevent the mistakes of the past from repeating themselves in the future.